Okay. So we are very sorry to have been a little delayed today because of this somewhat new interface. And I see people rolling in, so that's great. And as everybody starts to roll in, we're going to do the big reveal. Boom. So thank you everybody for being patient. My name is Dynasty. I'm one half of La Maison de Rouge. And today we have the illustrious Lucy Khan, Mistress Lucy Khan. Your pronouns are she, her, correct?
Yeah, any pronouns are honestly fine with me.
Okay. And so we're going to talk today about Lucy's journey into kink, or unfolding of as a kinky person, and all the wonderful things that she has experienced in her life and has brought to your life. And of course, we would invite anybody to ask questions at the end of the interview. And if you could just hold your questions until then, that would be most polite and welcome. And then let's see, we've got a little nifty banner here, so I'm just gonna stick that up for now. So Miss Lucy, tell us about kind of your overall persona and your identifying labels and honorifics and anything else that you want to give us about yourself in brief.
Sure. Well, it's so great to be here with you today, Dia. I'm so honored to be joining you on Periscope. Um,
Great to
for,
have you.
yes, thank you. So for me, I go by Mistress Lucy, but I'm not super, high protocol. So Lucy is fine. I like goddess as well, something about just like being worshipped I can really get into and really jives with kind of my overall my own fetishes. And so yeah, I think if I had to pick, it'd be like Mistress Lucy, Goddess Lucy, Boss is always a good one. I think that one's like straight to the point and kind of like gender neutral, which I like as well. I kind of got like a little masculine, feminine balance thing going.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think those would probably be my top three.
And then do you identify as a top, a dominant, a switch, anything?
Yeah, I definitely identify as both a top and a dominant, especially professionally. In my personal life, I will say that I do switch. And so I think that's part of what makes me a good dom, because I know what all those subby sluts are really craving inside their dirty little minds. So, that's something I've been kind of like withholding of in the past. But, as I mature into myself, I think just the more integrated that I can be in all aspects of myself and my persona, the better it is for mostly me, but also everyone else, I think.
Yeah, I think that that's the same for me. I recently came out as a switch too. And I definitely withheld that part of myself for a long time because I thought it might compromise my dominance in other people's views of me. And I feel like it does give a richness to the role that we play as dominants, but also to our personal lives, to explore that part of ourselves that is kind of reserve for the the deep dark stuff and the people that really kind of like deserve, I guess, to get to dominate us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's like just so hot and such a treat when I do choose to switch with somebody and I feel that they're like, oh my God, it's like, oh,
Yeah,
it's the ultimate because
yeah,
yeah, it's like really coming from a place of like choice and like surrender, and like to me, I always enjoy like topping subs who have power to give. If they're already kind of like groveling at my feet or think lowly of themselves in a really exaggerated way, it's a little bit hard to like feel what it is that they're giving to me sometimes. So I
yeah,
always like kind of like taking alphas and like
yeah.
rearranging them underneath me, and
Yeah.
so
It feels a little more perverse And like you said, it's a power exchange. So like if they didn't come to you with power, then what are you exchanging, you know? So
Yeah.
that totally makes sense. Do you have any other identifiers that you would like to share with us?
Hmm. I don't
Hmm.
know. What do you mean by
So,
identifiers?
so you produce pornography.
Ah, yes, yes. So I would
And
say that I'm like a
you-
content producer. I like to make, I started doing this probably about a year ago, almost exactly.
Mhm.
Um, so I do consider myself a content maker, and I also write. So I consider myself a writer and an artist, and that's kind of actually how I came into BDSM is through, art school. So that's something I
Oh,
definitely identify with as well.
okay. Let's definitely come back to that. That art being the gateway to all things evil and wonderful. Um, so, can you tell us real quick how long you've been a pro dom?
Yeah, I've been doing this since 2011, so 9 years now.
Oh
Can't believe it.
wow. Okay. And then let's back up a little bit to the beginning or the beginnings of your kink journey. What are some of your first kinky experiences? And they could be non-sexual or sexual.
Yeah, I tried to think back to, like, my early sexuality, and a lot of it had to do with kind of, like, exhibitionism and, kind of like novelty seeking, kind of dirty, or like dangerous, quote unquote, risky situations.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking of like, I grew up in like the early days of the internet,
Yeah.
back when AOL and AIM were a
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
And so I found myself on there a lot, just like role playing, all sorts of different characters. I'd be like a Swedish Olympic swimmer, and then I'd be like, a ballet dancer, and then I'd be a man, and then I'd be like, all these different characters. So I was always really interested in like kind of taking on different personas and kind of like exploring from within
Mhm.
that. And when I was 16, I got my driver's license. I grew up in Illinois, so there wasn't a whole lot to do there. And so I was kind of, always kind of a daring individual, I guess. So I started talking to some guy online who said he was like a cross country runner just like me, blah blah blah. And we just decided to meet. So I like this is no photos, no nothing, just like, okay, mom, I'm going to like the movies, like, see you.
Yeah.
And then I drove like an hour to Chicago and just met this dude. And like, I was like, thank God he was like actually like, someone my age, really cute. And we ended up hooking up like behind a bush. Like, I think I gave him like a blowjob while he was like finger banging me, just like out in public, just horny kids like
Yes.
trying to get off. So, yeah, I think like all those kind of like risky taboo, like, oh, you shouldn't be doing it, but you are kinds of
Mhm.
things really, that's where it all kind of started for me. And I think that's why I like those like role plays so much of like, taboo and like dirty mommy and all these things.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think it's so funny though, like as your story is unfolding, I find so much relation to it. Um and maybe because of a similar age possibly that like I definitely used AOL as a way to as my Tinder, like but
Yeah.
it wasn't anything that felt like normal. It was like definitely very risky, promiscuous, thrilling, like naughty behavior and sneaking out of the house at night and stuff like that.
That's
So
so awesome.
and then so how did that lead you? Like, did that lead you anywhere where you were constantly discovering more things about yourself?
Yeah, I think so I was like looking at porn when I was like, I don't know, 12 or something, like the early you're just like, oh no, pop-ups, fuck, like erase the like browser history and so much aggravation that caused me at the time. But I
Yeah.
was seeing, as you do, you're surfing the internet, you see all these things. I started seeing like images of like BDSM probably, and I was like, and I got like really, I was like really excited about it, but also really scared because I was like, "Oh, this is not like normal
Right.
This isn't just like penis and vagina, someone's like tied up and oh my God, like it's, it felt like kind of dangerous. And I think that like same thrill of like, meeting strangers off the internet was activated.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but a lot of the imagery I saw at the time was like female subs,
Yeah.
which like I think still is the case, right? Like femdom is still like a niche
Mhm.
in certain ways. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, so I'm into this. Like, oh my God, do I want to be submissive? Do I want to be tied up? Like, I don't know. And like, I got kind of like scared and uncomfortable with that because I always was very like aggressive and kind of like macho in other ways. I was like into sports and was always a tomboy and kind of like to, you know, be the best at everything. And so the thought of me like wanting to be tied up and submitted, I was like, oh my God, no, like I can't deal with this. Like,
Yeah.
and so I just kind of like didn't explore that.
Your turn.
I just close my eyes now. So I didn't explore that for like a really long time. And it w- yeah, I didn't explore that, but I did explore kind of like, group sex and like orgies and things like that, where it was more like, still like bringing a taboo of this like one to one,
Mhm.
heteronormative kind of thing that we're all supposed to be doing, but
Yeah.
without getting into like power dynamics specifically.
Right.
Um, but then but like, I think it was really through after like I learned about femdom as a thing. And like, I met a woman basically at like a friend's birthday party at a bowling alley. And she was like, we were talking, and I was like, what do you do? And she's like, oh, I'm a dominatrix. And yeah, I pee on men, I kick them in the balls, I like fuck them in the ass, and I get paid a lot of money. And I was like,
Yeah. Yes.
and
And
from that point, I was just like, "Holy shit!" Like, I just, basically Googled like dominatrix Los Angeles, and found someone to
how
study under.
how old were you when this happened?
That was when I was, let's see, I was in grad school. I was 25.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, you're talking about seeing a lot of females, women tied up and submissive in the submissive role, and but there was no representation of like men in those roles. Like
Yeah.
when we were, looking online or looking at porn or anything. So it didn't really register that like you could be the person doing the tying and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I didn't see anyone that looked like me or that was a woman who was doing this.
Yeah,
And I think, during that early adolescent era, it's like that's when you're kind of like first puberty and like first ideas of eroticism arise.
yeah,
And so, I think as women, we're like more flexible than men from what I read
yeah.
in this aspect. But still, it's like that kind of set the stage for what I thought was like available to me.
Yeah.
And so
And
it wasn't until I talked to this lady, I was like, "Oh, yeah, like, duh." Like
yeah, like it's so funny because like most of the imagery back then, I think on the internet existed for men also. So like something
Mhm.
uh like a man tied up would not necessarily appeal to most of the consumers of the pornographic content. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so after you met this dominatrix, and you're like, what did you do?
Yeah, I just went online and found Backpage, and, like, I'm like, "Thank God for Backpage, RIP Backpage."
Yeah.
Um, and it just did my thing on the internet, like, tried to like, there was, like, an adult gigs, listing,
Yes, yes.
basically,
Yeah.
and I just clicked on it. I met a woman, her name was Mistress Corinne, and, she was working in LA. She had her own house here at the time, and, I just like went in, met up with her. She seemed cool. She was like, "Oh, you're gonna be great." Like, kind of like boosted my ego, and I was like, "It's easy," like, which I'm like, okay, maybe give me a little more than that. But at the time, it helped me really just like get into it really smoothly and without a lot of like worries, I guess, because she was doing all the bookings and kind of like was my mentor, and she was good to me in that way.
It absolutely is helpful to have somebody be so encouraging though, right? Did she
Yeah.
give you but she gave you guidance and, like, kinda technical and safety skills and stuff like that?
Yeah, she did, she did. She was very casual about it, you know? So she'd kind of be giving me the down low at first, like, right before the session, so she'd be like, "Okay, well, you're gonna do this, so this is how you fist somebody." Like, I was like, "What?" Like, and so if I were teaching someone, mentoring someone, I would, take a little bit of a slower approach, but,
Yeah.
there was something about the kind of, like, casualness and, like, you can do itness that was really empowering and kind of like fun and funny. Um, and and what was also really helpful is that she knew all the clients that she was like setting me up with, so she had a lot of insight on that. And the like my first session ever, actually, who's a fellow I still see now and again, which is really fun. Um, Afterwards, he was just like, "Oh my god, that was just the best session I've ever had." And I was like, "What?" Like, literally my first session, like, you're telling me that was the like, okay, and so that really, like, gave me, as you can imagine, like, a huge ego boost and, like, confidence to, like.
Yeah, but having that fresh energy and enthusiasm, I think, is also infectious and important too. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
probably did have. So most of the people who ask questions right now, we're going to put your questions up and make sure that they get answered. But I just wanted to let you guys know that we're not answering questions at this moment, but your questions will absolutely be answered later on. Okay, so you mentored with Miss Corinne or Mistress
Mhm.
Corinne, and then where did you go from there?
After that, I just went independent. I
Mhm.
worked for her for a few months. She decided to leave the business, and I was like, okay, well, I guess she kind of downloaded me her brain. This is how you screen. This is how you do this for that. For that, I'm so grateful. And
Yeah.
then I just started putting in my own ads. I was an art student at the time, so I was just like taking my own photos, like made my own little website, and just yeah, posted ads and found a dungeon to rent. And so
Wow.
I just jumped into it, yeah.
Were you, because you'd mentioned earlier that art was kind of your gateway. Were you in art school this whole time?
Yeah, I was in art school, I was getting my MFA, so this was, my 2nd year. Thesis show was coming up, you have to pay for a lot of materials at that point, so, having like, kind of stumbling into domination work was just, like, a beautiful, like, dovetail for me at that time. And like, in my artwork, I was already kind of, like, exploring these bodily things. I was exploring this idea of, like, the artist as an escort, and how artists offer a kind of, like, cultural capital to their patrons and need this kind of, like, reciprocity in order to survive and exist. And so, yeah, coming into the BDSM where I just saw, like, so many more explicit, like, addresses of that issue of, like, power exchange and how, um, a symbiotic relationship works in that way. And so, yeah, it's like there's just so many things from like learning about consent and explicit negotiation and just being like clear and upfront about what expectations are that I think should really carry over back into not only the art world, but like every other industry, where lines and boundaries get really murky. And that's how people get taken advantage of, especially if they're like young and just starting out in a field. So I really feel very lucky to have found this as a way to like not only get to know myself better, but to also like make me less vulnerable to being preyed upon in the art field, because I had this way of sustaining myself and my own livelihood.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like a very beneficial and symbiotic relationship, the art and art school, as well as the domination. And I have to say, like, again, I relate on that 100%, even though they didn't really cross over while they were happening. Um, but exploring the body, exploring identity, and exploring imagery of the self was a huge part of my artistic exploration, and I was able to kind of continue that into my domination career. But I love that you have. So you're still working as an artist, and are you still mixing these two mediums together to create something that's a mixture of the two?
Yeah, I mean, I am still working as an artist, and I did do a series called FemDom POV,
Mhm.
where I had basically photos that I took in session, non-identifying photos. It was like close-ups of like scrotal inflation or mummification, and then I ended up rendering those photos in latex and then hanging them up in a gallery for display. So
Cool.
it's kind of like this really symbiotic relationship where it's like the dom work allows me to sustain myself, and create, but also it's like started conceptually to seep over, which has been really interesting. And I think there's still kind of this idea of like where I live like kind of like a double life, where I'm open with my friends and some of my colleagues, but I'm not going to direct them necessarily to my website and things like that. But like we're talking about integration earlier, and like just kind of allowing your whole self to show up in whatever capacity that you are. And I can imagine a day when like maybe the two will become one.
Mhm.
um
Yeah.
Maybe my slaves will be on display in the gallery, who's to say?
Yeah. I think, like, I guess for me, that's always been a goal. I find that the two compartments, they overlap. At first it was definitely a Venn diagram where the
Yeah.
overlap was like about the same size as the parts that stood out. And then as life goes on, the circles kind of start to overlap even more and more. And I find that it's really rich to always exist in this state of kind of fluidity rather than like rigidness of like, I need to be the dom now. Okay, now I'm going to be the artist. Okay, now I'm
Yeah.
going to be my vanilla self. And kind of like exist on this like continuum or this like spectrum of fluid identity.
Yeah.
And it's been really it's affected it's brought a lot more richness to also to my domination, which is more holistic. And um and I find that like a lot of doms that I know are actually moving in this direction too, which it sounds like you're kind of doing the same thing as well. Which is awesome. It's like um you're enriching all the parts of your life with the other parts. And in some ways, and I know this is going to be a really weird combo, but also kind of relative. It's like when you have compost and you feed your worm compost, like the trash from your kitchen, and then like the trash from the worm is its poop, and that like is what feeds your plants, and you could eat your plants.
Yes.
One big circle.
I'm all about that ecology.
Yes, closing that circle.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool that, to hear that you're kind of like overlapping your circles and that other Doms that are doing the same. Like, was it for you? Was it more of like, was it a fluid thing that just kind of you found happening, or did you like make a conscious choice or decision at some point to
um
move closer together?
it was almost like kind of, I'm going to use a weird little visual metaphor, but it was almost like turning my head in one direction and seeing that there was like, instead of just like kind of this blank wall, there was a hole in the wall. And and every time I looked over, the hole would be like there, and there would be light shining through it. And so I was kind of like, oh, what's this about? Like, what could I do to not have to keep turning my head? So like the hole, like I've dug the hole to be bigger and let more light in. And let's say that where I'm standing is the dark, and so letting the light into the dark is in some ways like a metaphor for the shadow work too that I've been
Mm,
doing, where I'm exploring the the parts of myself that I've kind of like tucked away because they didn't fit the dominatrix mold or archetype, and and allowed um and allowed myself to be kind of this like one-dimensional thing for a little while that was very performative.
mhm.
And and I found that to be like, at first, like it was all I could do, but then after a while it became kind of like I wasn't able to remember anything. I
Yeah.
couldn't recall like like certain times during sessions that I had said certain things or done certain things. And it wasn't that I was disembodied or what's the word, dissociating. It was that I wasn't. I was performing something and I wasn't embodying it.
Mm.
So yeah, it was interesting to just kind of like realize that I was doing this thing, and then to be like, okay, I think that I would like to, start being a lot more present and embodied and myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally vibe with like all of that you just said, like the aspects of the shadow work, the performativity of it, and just trying to be more present in what like one's own life, right?
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
every aspect.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's something that over the years that I've learned about myself that has brought me back into this work as something that's more satisfying. What about you? Like, what kind of newer discoveries about yourself have you made through this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in the beginning when I came to this work, I was just enthralled by everything and novelty. I didn't know what I liked, but like I just knew that I wanted like new sensations, new like things, just everything new. Give me the
Yeah.
weirdest fetishes you can think of.
Yeah.
Um and there's a part of me that still really enjoys that novelty, right? That novelty factor, but it's not like enough anymore. And as I get to know myself better, I'm like, okay, these are the things I'm really into and really like starting to own them as my own kind of fetishes and kinks rather than something I'm just providing an experience for other people.
Yeah.
And so some of that, I spoke to like this like love of taboo and like role playing, there's like family dynamics or like boss, like kind of these like sexual harassment power games, right? I really enjoy that. Um, and just like owning that feels really like good, just really juicy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and also the toilet play, that's something that I've kind of found myself in that niche because a lot of doms don't do that kind of work, especially full toilet play, and that's something that once I started doing it, I'm like, oh, this is like second nature to me.
Well, can you actually talk a little bit more about that? Because I know that there's definitely a lot of people that maybe don't quite understand that fetish or that kink. And
Mhm.
I think it's good to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a few different ways that we can talk about it or get into it. I mean, I'll just start with like the extremes because and like kind of lay out the spectrum. The first might be more obvious of like wanting to be dehumanized or degraded, right? And so that goes along with like humiliation, but on an extreme level. It's like, oh, not only am I like licking your shoe and eating detritus, but I'm like literally eating the shit from your body, which is like kind of like the filthiest thing a body can produce, right?
It
Like
really is.
sticky, it's like, really intense, it's pungent, it doesn't come off easily. It's like extremely taboo. Like these things are things that, we all go through and getting potty trained as like babies, you're taught where to shit, where not to shit. It's like one of the most basic like human taboos that we have, I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah.
Right. And so by breaking that, by saying, oh my God, like I'm like a human toilet, like just a hole in the ground to consume and break down your garbage. Like it's all I'm gonna live on. Like, oh, like that really, like, if you're into degradation, that is like the ultimate, in many ways. Um, so that's kind of like one end, right? And then the other end I'm very interested in is like this like ultimate goddess worship, you
Mhm.
know, that
Mhm.
you like I am embodying this yeah, the goddess, the universe, the divine, and everything that comes from my body, whether it's like my sweat, my tears, my armpit hairs, my pubic hairs, my, toenail clippings, my piss and my shit, all that is like nutrients and nurturance and like deserves to be worshiped and like taken into oneself as like a sacrament.
Yes,
You
a
know?
sacrament. It's
And
an
it's almost
exalted form of consumption.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like it's almost like a becoming one with, it can be very intimate in terms of like, okay, this is like food and matter and like, this plant was made by the sun and like then it grew, and then I ate it, and then it passed through all of my entire body, all like 30 yards of intestines, and then I pushed it out, and then now it's gonna go into your body, and we're connected by this, like, morsel of the cosmic universe.
Yes. Well, that is, I mean, honestly, um, that is how a lot of nutrients that can't be broken down by certain types of organisms is processed, is through the bodies of other animals or organisms before it. So it's a process that, like, for example, there's this magic mushroom that's poisonous. It's called a Amanita muscaria, but it's poisonous to humans. But if a deer eats it and then pees it out, its pee becomes like the in a way like the psychedelic sacrament that humans can consume, because it's already been rid of all the poisons.
Wow,
And
that's
so you
so
could trip
cool.
off of deer pee if they've eaten the magic mushroom.
That's so rad.
Yeah, so that's totally, I get that too. Like you said, the key word being like kind of like sacrament of the goddess. And
Mhm.
I totally understand that. Can you would you be comfortable talking about like why somebody would seek this?
Oh gosh, I mean, I don't know that there's like one blanket answer,
Hmm.
that covers all. Just like any other kink, it's so, one's formative experience can be really individual. But I mean, I can speak for, I mean, I know I've had subs who have talked to me about their kind of like childhood experiences, like around bathroom, toilet training, and that as like a site of control. So maybe someone's parents, only paid attention to them when they were like in the bathroom, or like going to the bathroom like a good boy or girl, or, something like that. So then that becomes like a really charged site.
Yeah.
Um, it can also be like a way of like exercising one's own control of, like, I mean, maybe this is also kind of goes into like ABDL and like adult baby diaper lovers play, but like, yeah, kind of like withholding one's own shit as a way to like maintain control or exercise control, or shitting where they're not supposed to,
Mhm.
as a way to do the same. So again, I think it's all about just like different expressions of like power, control, surrender, and kind of like claiming space in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I know for me, this is kind of like a funny story of like thinking back to my own childhood. My family was very like into like being like, okay, like, as a little kid, I was like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, like, did you poop? Like, okay, like, because in our family it was like, okay, it's a health thing. You want to make sure you're like everything's flowing through, it's all good. Just like you're eating, you need to like, let it out.
Yeah.
And so I had a period of time where I was like constipated. Like I like struggled to like go regularly. And so my mom made me this freaking chore chart, like, to get my allowance for the week. I had to like, mop the floor, do your dishes, and also like go number two 3 times a week or 4 times a week, however many it was. And
It's a chore. It's such a chore. Oh, wow. So
yeah.
did you achieve all your goals as a child?
I did, and, so I think that for me, it was, like, made, like, going to the bathroom, like, a really, like, positive, like, experience, like, "Yay, you pooped!" Like, "Hooray,
Yeah.
everyone's happy." You
Oh,
know?
okay, I see that. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that can come around. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
'cause it's not a it's not something that you do, like, as an adult, it's not really something that you put on your to-do list, it's
yeah.
but if you're a kid and it's on your to-do list as something you get, like, points for, then I can see how it would become, like, this point of joy, once it's happened.
Yeah, it's like accomplishment, like, "Yay, I get money, I get a reward," you
Yep,
know? And I
yep.
forgot about that for a long time, and then I was like, "Oh my god, wait a minute, this makes total sense that I enjoy doing this to people," because it's like, Every time I'm like, yes, like
You actually do get money every time.
exactly.
I love it. Um, so that's fascinating that you had such a positive poop experience as a kid in your formative years. I had a pretty negative one, and I've talked about it with quite a few people. Not a therapist, but I've also had it like written into a story about myself. But it was pretty traumatic, and I hadn't really like made that connection. And maybe this is one of the reasons that I don't really like that my that my poop time is like so private and has to be kind of like coaxed, and that it's still kind of this point of um contention in my life sometimes where I'm just like, oh, is it gonna happen, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll just tell everybody real quick because, you know, why not?
I
But
would love to hear.
when I would say probably 3 or 4, um, I was at home with my grandmother and my aunt, and then okay, so my grandmother and my single aunt, and then my aunt and uncle who were married. Um, so my aunt was my family, and then her husband, the uncle, was somebody that I met like once. So I was on the toilet and I was very constipated and I was too small to like know what to do. Like it was hurting my butt, and I called out for my grandmother, and she came and she didn't know what to do either because like, you know, what do you do when this little kid has a turd stuck in its butt? Left the bathroom and came back with a spoon, and like a big metal spoon, and she had my aunt and my uncle, who I'd only met again only once or twice, lift me off of the toilet and hold me like by my hands and feet like a hammock while my grandmother took the spoon to my butt and dug the turd out.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Granny.
I know. And it was like it was painful, but it was also extremely humiliating and traumatizing in that right of like not knowing what was going on. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm like, that's like a punishment like that I'm gonna do to somebody now.
Right.
Grandma.
And it's, you know, like I don't fault her for that. She was doing what she knew to do. I don't even know how to heal from that trauma, you know. I just think it's a funny story, but I do, you know, think about like me as a little child and kind of like soothing myself or just like blocking it out, or you know, whatever it was that I had to do to.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, you deserve the most beautiful poop times for the rest of your life, Dia. Like, I hope you fucking have candles and like lavender and just like a warm washcloth, you know, like
Yes. Yes.
make it work for you.
I'm making it. Yeah, I'm gonna start like really pampering my poop times. You know, I've already got a really great poop stool, and I like to kind of do it in the dark, and you know, so it's like it's interesting to meet somebody like you who was kind of like merited for your poops, and are so you know you're so like into this thing that you do, and being able to see it in these different ways, and then helping other people understand that.
Yeah.
So thank you. And
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story too. It's just like a personal thing, but also it's like a thing that everybody does like all the time, you know? And so I think it's like just nice to be able to talk about that shit explicitly, you know?
yeah,
Like I think that like I mean I think that with a lot of things, but like, you know, just like I mean, that's part of like the power of like BDSM, right? That we get to like kind of like say these like fucked up dynamics and things out loud and embody them and play them out in like a consensual way that
yeah,
are always kind of like under the surface of society. You know?
yeah. And we can decide to at some point take ownership of these parts of ourselves that have sat in the dark for so long and not feel shame about them.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also very important too.
For sure, for sure.
So on that note, do you think that BDSM and other alternative sexualities are becoming more accepted, or at least like seen as something that can help people? Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think
Mhm.
there's definitely just like in terms of like porn and availability, there's a lot more variety out there
Yeah,
now, clip sites and things like that. Um, and I think there's a more also like more research about like how we store like trauma or like, uncomfortable experiences and how it's not all like up here. Like
yeah.
I heard a quote recently that was I love. It's the issues are in our tissues. And I'm
Oh,
like,
yes, that's true. Yeah,
yeah, and so I think I always encourage people to, like, act out their fantasies and their, like, these, like, obsessions that, we all have because then only then if you turn towards them can they start to, like, transform or you can, like, start to be in relationship to maybe the shadow aspects of yourself that you weren't so comfortable with that are kind of, like, hidden in sexuality, you know? But I think it's, like, when we, like, really repress and turn away and, like, pretend like it's not there, that things become like calcified and even more like powerful.
yeah.
And and BDSM is just like one way that happens, right? Like it happens in like a lot of other areas too.
Yeah, I mean, I think like BDSM being tied to sexuality is definitely something that happens in a way where people are they can be fearful of it if they're not comfortable with sexuality. And I think that that's a very powerful and potent place to come from and to work with, but it's not what everybody's ready for.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um but like doing shadow work is also kind of tied to sexuality, especially in the American culture, because sexuality is and sex in general is so not talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So do you have any thoughts about the I don't know the what are you doing in your life to kind of like better your engagement with alternative sexualities and um healing?
Yeah. I mean, I think I love that you mentioned this idea of like shadow work, right? Of like working with parts of ourselves that maybe we turn away from. And I'd love to hear like more specifics about what that looks like for you. I mean, for me, I've been working with like plant medicines and like sitting in different ceremonies and things like that, working with ayahuasca
Mhm.
and psilocybin and things where it's like those things aren't, like before I'd like take acid and trip and be like, with my friends. And now I'm like, okay, that's like not really that's not what it's for me at this
Right.
point, like for me it's really to like be spending quality time with myself and to be like kind of like facing the things that I myself are scared of or uncomfortable with. And
Mhm.
so I'm finding like with my slaves that I've had for a long time with like the kind of people that I want the kind of subs I want to invite into my life is I want to find other people who are also really interested in like using this space as like one of like transformation, and like actualization and like really exploring parts that like are enticing, but also a little intimidating at the same time. I just think it's just turning towards fear
Yeah.
can be so powerful, and like, you know, earlier in my career, I'm like, oh, okay, whatever you want, like kind of a strip club with chains sort of deal. Like, sure, I can, tease and deny, whatever. But
Yeah.
now it's like, unless you're doing one of my fetishes, like, toilet or ball busting, which I'm like, okay, that's fine. You want to try one? Let's do this.
Yeah.
Like the long term relationships, I think is really where like the meat is at for me now. And really kind of like opening my I don't know, my heart, I guess, and like my whole self towards inviting that in um,
Yeah.
because it transforms me as well,
Mm.
it's not like a one-way thing.
Yeah,
So
that's so great. I love hearing that. And I love that like there really is more of a turn toward this alignment of of interests. And and that people like you and like myself, kind of coming more into ourselves and being as authentic and genuine as we can be as pro doms as well. We're more focused on kind of like you said, the transformative aspects of the work that we do, and people that want to find meaning in it, where it's not
Mhm.
just, not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's not just like a glorified, like jerk off. It's not
Yeah.
about the orgasm. It's not just about um, like sexual fulfillment. There is something deeper behind the sexual fulfillment.
Yeah, for sure. And I also find myself like in that vein, like gravitating towards like I don't people like scenes where it's like kind of like the cosmic balance is somehow righted, It's like I think maybe that's why I'm so into like, filthy goddess worship because like women's bodies have been seen as such like dirty, messy, uncontainable sites for throughout so much of history, right? And so to kind of reclaim that, be like, no, this is fucking a sacrament. This is a divine gift that you are going to eat and consume. My ruby showers, my fucking armpit hairs, that feels really like I'm like I don't know, like a vigilante for justice or
Yeah.
something, or like enacting like karmic retributions or something like that.
I feel that 100%, and I think it's awesome that you're doing this, as well as, I'm also seeing like in portrayals of real women like birthing or breastfeeding or being pregnant, not sexualized. And not that there's anything wrong with sexualizing these elements of ourselves, but they're things that are traditionally seen as not sexy. So
Hmm.
we're bringing all that into the mix of like what it means to be a female and what it means to have a body that's female, and showing people like, this is what's real, this is what it is, and as a dominant, this is what you get. And just it's like it's I don't know, I feel like it's magical because it's almost like the time is now to really kind of like even the scales in
Yeah.
um in gender justice. I'm not sure if that's a term or not, but you know the way that women are, that we bleed for all this time but don't die. That used to be like
Mhm.
this joke. It's like, don't trust anything that bleeds for 7 days and still alive. And I was always like, I understand why that might be funny to you, but it's just like, isn't that magical to you? Or do you see that as like weird? Like that's
Yeah. I think it's from like a place of fear from them, where it's like I'm intimidated, so I'm gonna make a joke about this thing, so then I don't have to deal with my real feelings about like how maybe
sure.
inadequate I am. That like I can't even fathom what it's like to bleed for even one day out my dick. Um,
I will show you.
let us help.
Yes. You'll live. Oh goodness. Okay, so do you um do you have any like pet peeves that are kind of fun and anecdotal about your work?
Hmm. You mean like things about subs that bother me or
Yeah, things that maybe that other people can learn from, as in how to approach or to treat us.
Cool. Yeah, okay, I'll just give a real basic one. I'm like, this is so like 101 shit. Us Doms, we've laid out the instructions for you on how to contact us. I
Oh,
guarantee you, if you just read the contact page, it will tell you step one, step two, we need this information, this information, this information. Just give us that information that we're asking for. I'm like so bewildered when people are like, can I come see you? Like, oh, hi. Like, yeah, like no references and nothing about themselves. Like,
yeah,
really, you just use, what are we gonna do together? So that is just like a real simple thing to show us that like, you can follow basic instructions. Like if you can't follow basic instructions, why would we want to play with you? You
right.
know? Like,
Yeah,
you're probably not gonna be a very considerate person to play with if you only care about what you want. What about what we want? Show us that you can, like, be receptive to that, and, the world can open up to you, but if not, you're gonna still just be wanking in front of your computer monitor until
right.
your hand falls off.
And that's probably what they're doing, like take your hand off your dick and, read, like receive the words and then type out some of your own.
Yeah, just respond.
Like,
Respond to what we're asking for.
yeah, yeah, and I see that as like maybe the maybe the media, like the way that media has portrayed women as like just these like available people, like, but we're actually running a business. And so we're not just available people all the time. We're actually like specifically providers of a special service. And that is a business that you have to kind of like engage in a business like way to get past the front door. So treat
Yeah.
it like a business. Treat it like, you're trying to get a haircut or you're trying to like, I don't know, get your teeth clean. Like you wouldn't just go to your dentist and be like, "Hey, can I see you?
Are you available?
Are you available at like 4 a.m.?" Yeah, that's just
Exactly. It's like, yeah, if you're that horny, go to my clip site, buy a fucking clip. Then you can jerk off all you want, You don't have to make any contact with me. Just have the content. But like if you're really trying to like see me in person, just like go through the hoops. Like you have to do it. It shows us that you're like yeah, responsible and receptive. Um it's real basic.
yeah. Yeah. So, luckily we haven't had too many questions just yet. But I'm going to open up the floor for questions in a moment, right after I ask Mistress Lucy our last fun little question, which is, what are your vices and what are your virtues?
Oh, I don't have any vices.
Now,
Gosh, vices and virtues. Let me think about that. I mean, vices, I think it's like, I can being like kind of a perfectionist, I guess, or kind of like having that compulsive energy sometimes. I can get wrapped up just like probably most people here can get wrapped up with the internet, like scrolling through Twitter for too long and just like that's something I'm like just trying to step away from, but it's so hard, especially like when I'm looking at like other DOMs. I'm like, oh my God, she's awesome. Like she's doing this. Oh, should I do that? That's a great idea. I get like really like turned up
yeah,
and like kind of like go down a rabbit hole really easily that I have to sometimes like crawl myself out of.
yeah.
I really don't get any sleep. So that's something I'm really trying to work on and just like kind of put my blinders on after like a certain point of like indulging. Um, yeah.
Yeah, same.
So
I
that
can relate.
like a very contemporary vice, right?
Right. But a very easy one to fall into just because, like if you don't have like who actually schedules, their social media engagement in a way where they're like, okay, from, 12 p.m. to 45 p.m. I'm gonna scroll and like and do everything on my Instagram and then not come back to it.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
Yeah. It's like, I think that's I've heard you're supposed to do that somewhere, and I'm like, it's just,
Mm,
it's hard for me to do that and to exercise any kind of control, but
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
working on it,
But
Practice makes practice.
that's a proper vice, and I think a lot of people relate, myself included. And what about your virtues?
Aw, my virtues. I would say like I really care. Like I know it's not like there was a period of time where it wasn't cool to be like too earnest or whatever, or too like vulnerable with oneself.
Mhm.
But like I don't know. I think I'm just maturing out of that shit where I'm like, you know what? I don't care. Like I don't care that I cared like about these things. So I really care about like the subs that I have and like especially those like I've had a few subs who've been with me for like several years, 5 to 9 years.
Yeah.
And I really hold those relationships like really near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
And my dom friendships too, the people that I've like met in this world, that I've learned from and that see doing like this important work in their own like special way. I just have a lot of like respect and like you know, yeah, respect and love for that. And like I really come into this world wanting to engage with like other people who are like as sincere as I am in this that we're doing. There's so much noise out there about like, oh, you gotta hustle, like wake and what is it like wake up and grind or something like that, and just like get the
Mhm.
money and like all this stuff. And it's like that's like honestly exhausts me like spiritually. So yeah, I'm really um learning to just like lead with vulnerability and like be okay with like, having my heart like slashed open and just like bleeding from the chest, you know.
I know, because when it heals, it's much stronger. And yeah, I feel the same way. I relate like so much to everything that you said. It's been really great to talk to you and to hear all of your, your more recent insights about yourself as well, because I think that I'm coming into those, or that I have been occupying that space within myself recently too, and being like a heart-centered person, and caring about the relationships that I have in this industry, and not shutting myself off for the sake of like limiting access for money. um,
Yeah.
that's something that that we do have to do to protect our energy at times. But like for the people who are kind of already on the inner circle, like I feel a real kinship with, and these are people that I want to maintain like lasting and loving relationships with.
Yeah, for sure. I like totally resonate with so much of what you've said too. And like it just makes me like really happy and hopeful to hear that like, there's more than just like there's other people doing this kind of work and kind of like working through like the messiness of like being a person, honestly.
Totally. Messy, messy job being a person. Okay, so let's see. We've got one question from John Scott on Facebook, and this was a while ago. Is it still less acceptable for a male submissive? I'm gonna assume that he's saying like kind of to be a male submissive.
Yeah.
And do you
Yeah.
have any answer to that?
I mean, I think that is one area where things are really changing, right? Like where, because like toxic masculinity wasn't like a term until fairly recently, I would say. And now that that's part of like the vernacular and vocabulary, I think that's really like thrown a lot of like traditionally alpha male like behaviors into the spotlight as actually just being like dicks and assholes, and like I think I think like being a male submissive, like I love a gentleman. There's a reason they call it a gentleman, like and a service oriented man. Like I think like maybe people don't call it like submissive or something, or think of it in that way, but like everybody loves a service oriented man, I think. Someone who makes themselves useful and makes themselves kind of like working for like the greater experience of the whole group or the woman that they're with or the person that they're with.
Yes.
So I don't think it's becoming less and less acceptable for males to be submissive. And I think as like people wake up to like just how toxic like this alpha and like dominant male culture is, it's going to be like something that's really desired and like cultivated in
Yeah.
our Y chromosome havers.
Yes. And I also see like the 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 alternative of kind of what we're coming out of, the alpha male paradigm being this very kind of hierarchy based contest, like who's the manliest man, and they're like whoever's at the top is like, it's the top of the triangle where there can only be one. And that is very, it's very alienating. It's not about cooperation. So I feel like that, as especially in this current time, um, where everybody kind of needs to like look out for each other and do some things that are for the greater good, like wear a face mask, that we're all trying to be cooperative, like maybe not everybody has or is carrying coronavirus, but we're all wearing masks in solidarity because we care about each other and we want to like, move comfortably amongst each other.
Yeah.
So that's just like, it's something that there was this article about, how men they don't want to appear weak, so they're not wearing masks. There's some men doing this.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's just yeah. So I think also it is becoming a lot more acceptable for men to be submissive or to be cooperative at least.
Mhm.
Let's see. There's another question here. Somebody said, "Damn it, Toby said Mistress Lucy definitely feeds her worms compost." We got a little. All right. Um, and then Robert, who is always a very enthusiastic participant, asks, aside from full toilet, what kink/fetish do you love to hear a sub request for a session and why?
Ooh, good one. Well, I guess one thing I mentioned briefly, but I didn't really go into is ball busting.
Yes.
I love a good ball busting request. Like, it's just, I used to play soccer in college. And
Oh,
so just, I have great aim. I love making contact, like the smack of it, the sound of it, watching them like kind of like keel over and go like, it's just so sweet. Like, again, it's like that, like, balancing of the cosmic scales, where we've used this language around balls, like, "Oh, he's got some big balls to be able to say that," and it's like, no, balls are so weak. Scrotums are like the just
yes.
so vulnerable.
No,
And
and on the outside of the body, like clearly that is an equalizing anatomical element, like having your big manly balls on the outside. Like
yeah.
ovaries are the strong things.
Yeah, I'm trying to, like, change the vocabulary and be like, instead of, "Oh, you're a pussy," be like, "Oh, you're a scrotum, man. You're gonna scrot out on me."
I like that. You're a scrotum. You're just a fleshy sack with some weak testicles inside of it.
Exactly. Eggs floating in some fluid.
I love the image of them just like keeling over that you're talking about. Do you have any special ball busting shoes?
I like to do it barefoot
Mhm.
sometimes because then I can kick harder. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and like I'm feeling the smack,
The smack, that flesh on
know.
flesh contact sound, yes.
Yeah.
So we have another question from Robert that also says, one piece of advice you wish you could go back and tell your younger Dom self starting out.
Well, that's a great question. Gosh, I don't know. Maybe I feel like I would say like try everything twice, but I kind of did that. Um, Maybe just like pace yourself, and you can raise your rates.
Oh, okay, yeah. There we
I don't know. I think maybe when we're starting out, it's like the price points are different, and like I was used to working for like $12 an hour, so I was like, woo, like $200, like that's like so much money, But now looking back, I was like, damn, I really worked. I hustled my little tail off, and I really could have maybe raised it like 50 or $100 a little bit sooner.
yeah,
Yeah, just value my own time and my own energy, I
yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Yes, value your own time and energy, that's great. Yeah, and
Mhm.
having a self-referential stance on that, I think can be challenging when you don't really know what everybody else is doing, or even
Mhm.
you wanna know what everybody else is doing, but, like, referring to your own self and being like, "Well, what would make this one thing that I'm doing worth my time?" And
Mhm.
asking yourself that is something that I would definitely have done for
Mhm.
myself starting out too. Let's see, next question. Do you have any favorite books on spirituality, please?
Oh, cute question. Let's see. Well, I just read The Power of Now by Eckhart
Mm,
Tolle.
yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. It was like, perfect for kind of like quarantine lifestyle, to be honest.
Mhm.
Just like, you know what, if you don't have a future or past that you're telling yourself your same story about yourself over and over again, a lot of your problems don't really exist,
Yeah.
not in the present moment. So I would definitely recommend that, especially for now. Like And then also I really like, I don't know that this is actually spirituality, but it's a book called Emergent Strategy.
Hmm.
And it's by an author named Adrienne Marie Brown, who is like a facilitator for a lot of like social justice work and things like that. And it kind of talks about how complex systems arise and can be changed by really relatively simple actions and interaction.
Oh, okay.
And so it's like kind of like where practicality of like social justice and organizing and things like that meet with
Yeah.
kind of like maybe like radical self-help kind of thing.
Hmm. Can you tell us the name of that book one more time? I'm gonna type it out.
Yeah, it's Emergent Strategy. And she also wrote a book called Pleasure Activism, which I would also really
Ooh, I like that.
yeah.
What is her name?
It's Adrienne Marie Brown, Adrian, and then second name Maree, and then Brown, Brown.
Okay. Um, put that up real quick. And then let's see, we've got Miss Tallulah asking, as you've aged as a professional Dom, how has this been reflected with your clients, if at all?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I've gotten more younger clients as I've aged, which is kind of delightful. When I
Ooh.
was just starting out, in my like mid to late 20s, I would say almost all my clients were like older, yeah, older gentlemen, like, 40s and over.
Mhm.
But, as I've gotten into like my mid 30s and early 30s, um, yeah, I've seen like, people who are in like college and like newly just graduated in grad school, things like that. So that's been really fun to kind of like introduce those who are new to BDSM, to kind of like in this into the art, so to speak, in this more, mommy figure sort of way.
Oh yeah. I love that. Actually have too. It's interesting, like as a younger as a younger Dom, I got a lot of older clients, and then now that I'm a little older, I'm getting some younger clients.
Yeah, isn't that funny how that happens? It's like maybe that's like part of the power play too, you
Yeah,
know? I
yeah.
can't wait to be like a MILF and just like fucking full on like cougar mommy, you
I
know?
can't wait for you to be a MILF too. I wanna see what that looks like. Okay, so we've got another question here from Robert. You mentioned cross country. Was that your NCAA sport? Do you still run if it was?
Oh, well, I played soccer in college, so that was my sport. That was my NCAA sport. I ran cross country in high school. I was pretty competitive, but I found that I didn't really enjoy it. I just liked winning at stuff. So that's why I was doing it. And I decided, wasn't really the right thing for me to do. But I still do run, actually. I enjoy running, like trail running, especially.
Okay. All right. So before we get into any more questions, because there aren't any just yet, um, I believe this is your information here where we have your OnlyFans, your actual website and your Twitter handle, and then your OnlyFans.
Yes. I think, I think you have my clip site, my Twitter handle, and then my OnlyFans.
Oh, okay, that's your clip site.
Yeah, I do have my official website is mistresslucy.org.
Mistress org. And then your clips.
The clips is the iwantlucycon.com.
Okay. And then we'll just scroll that across the bottom as well.
Oh,
Let's see if we've
yeah.
got any more comments. Miss Tallulah says, Adrienne Marie Brown's podcast is so good. So
Yeah.
do you listen to that? Is that something you would recommend?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I believe it's called How to Survive the End of the World. And
Oh,
yeah, very pertinent. And she talks about like apocalypse and the idea of apocalypse, and she talks a lot about like she references Octavia Butler a lot, so
oh,
using the idea of like Afrofuturism and Black feminist ideas and like how we can imagine the future in the world that we want to live in.
Mm,
Yeah, but you can find the podcast, How to Survive the End of the World, I think on SoundCloud.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that Adrienne Marie Brown is a woman of color.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would definitely like to hear more kind of like universal themes from women of color. One of my very first exposures to spirituality was from Sylvia Brown, who's, I think she's a woman of color. Like, I think she's like vaguely brown. She might be a white lady, but she was on Montel Williams a lot, and it was kind of vague and she didn't talk about her race a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but her insight and her wisdom and her clairvoyance was so fascinating to me because she wasn't like a white man.
Yeah.
So that sounds really amazing. How to survive the end of the world. Do you have any upcoming projects or travels or anything that you would like to tell us about?
Well, let's see. I'm not traveling anytime soon until things get kind of figured out, unfortunately, which is sad. But I'm enjoying kind of staying in place for now.
Mhm.
I think the things I'm most excited about right now are, well, I'm on the board of SWOP-LA, so Sex Worker Outreach Project, Los Angeles, and we've been working really hard during this time to do an ERF fund, so an emergency relief fund for sex workers, since as you probably know, it's like the PPP and all that stuff excludes anyone who is kind of like in the sex industry or sex trade um,
Mhm.
as their business type. So we've been distributing we've been collecting funds and getting donations and distributing them to street-based workers and all sorts of different types of sex workers who are based here in the LA area. Um, so yeah.
Are you taking donations for that or
We
any?
are, yeah. So the website for that is SWOP-LA, SWOP-LAERF.com.
ERF.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then that is so that people can send in donations to help out.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So, if you are, a client, someone who enjoys the content we all make, the sparkle and perversion we bring into your lives, I would encourage you to make a donation if you're able to
Yeah,
support those who are like in need during this time and can't work or are forced to be doing like street-based or in-person work at this time.
yeah,
I
and
feel really,
very few of us qualify for unemployment. Also, myself included. So it's not like we have much assistance other than like from the private sector.
yeah.
And of course that assistance and support is always so greatly appreciated, and we never forget who these people are. um but yeah, it's people helping people. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, for
So one
sure.
last question from Robert. um do you think more younger clientele is because kink fetish is becoming more mainstream slash acceptable?
Yeah, probably. Right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I think people are also okay, so there's the age dynamic, like they want to find somebody who has experience, of course, because why not? And also that people are also becoming a lot more aware in my bubble that like, and this is going to be, very kind of uh this is going to be about the Asians. So, we're Asian, and I can say this cuz I'm Asian. But but most of the Asian doms that I met are pretty with it, like intelligence wise and skill wise. Like many of us kind of have it going on. Like we know what we're doing. We're not flakes. We are not going around like, spreading rumors or trying to dox people, or, we're relatively low drama people. So I'm thinking that that's going to work in our favor too.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So, any last words?
Oh my gosh. Well, I had a great time talking to you, Dia. This was so lovely. One thing I will plug is my OnlyFans, because I am super excited about the stuff that's going on there. Basically, I have a real life subby hubby, and we have been filming together during quarantine. And so that's how I've been getting my playtime and kinks out during this time when I'm not seeing my usual clients.
Yeah.
So, if you like real life femdom, like FLR, chastity, role reversal, ruined orgasms, pegging, all the good stuff. I do like XXX stuff on there. Like, it's like my little playground safe space. So if you're into that kind of thing, I encourage whoever to check it out. Join me there.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, that sounds like that's where all your content is going now, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's like I have things on there that I don't put on my clip sites, because it's like I want my subscribers to be seeing all these like really intimate moments and not necessarily someone just like buying one clip for like $5.99.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Are you doing this live also? Or are you doing it on OnlyFans Live?
I'm not using the live because it just sent like I feel like who's gonna watch like 3 hours of something, So what I do is I'll like I'll film it and then I'll chop it up into like 5-minute segments, and then I'll like drip them throughout the week. And I find that to be much more like digestible as a porn viewer myself.
Right. Yeah. Um, One thing I do think is, and I don't know, you didn't really mention this as cuckold play being one of your things.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
it.
I thought you might, but it could be, something that that is, and this is just kind of like something that I've been thinking about doing, letting some live subscribe or some subscribers kind of like tune in live at a certain time when you're doing something that qualifies as cuckolding.
I like that. I like that. Little bedroom peepers.
Yeah. Yeah, not the full show, but just a little hint here
I
and
love that. I love
there.
that. Do you do any online stuff yourself, Dia?
Not so much. The last thing that I did on my OnlyFans was just like some reading of erotica.
Ooh, sexy.
It's just like, I don't know. I'm such a perfectionist when it comes to like performances that it's hard for me to put anything out. And I also just like am very protective of my private time. And I don't, like right now, I don't want to work at all. I just want to loaf around and eat bread and like, read books.
Yeah, absolutely. As you should.
Oh, Robert's so sweet. He said, "Was spectacular." All right. So thank you guys for tuning in and for asking such thoughtful and thought-provoking questions. And thank you, Mistress Lucy, for being your wonderful, effervescent self. And I've had such a wonderful time talking to you and being able to relate on so many things and seeing you like, go your own direction in this industry of like so many, act-alikes and wannabes is really great.
Aw, same to you. I had the best time, and yeah, again, thanks for having me, and I feel very honored. I hope we get to connect again soon.
I hope so too. And I hope when this quarantine lifts, we can all kind of like get together and have a big Dom celebration.
I would love that.
I would too. All right. So good night, everybody. We'll be back next week with more guests. And I hope the rest of your week is wonderful. Take care. Goodbye.